All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a statement from the Buddha that, on the surface, seems to make absolutely no sense, but it actually unlocks one of the most powerful lessons about our own lives. I mean, it's a wild question, right? If you've reached a state that's beyond life and death, why on earth would you announce you're about to die? It feels like a total contradiction. But stick with me, because the answer is one of the most profound teachings you'll ever come across. So our journey really begins with the proclamation itself, the statement that honestly just feels like a riddle. And there it is, straight from the source. The Buddha says two things that just seem completely impossible to hold at the same time. First, he says he's eternal, that he'll never enter a final nirvana, a state of just ceasing to be. But then, in the very same breath, he says he's going to pass away. So what is going on here? When you lay it out side by side like this, the paradox is just glaring. On one hand, you have this claim of being an eternal, ever-present teacher. On the other, the announcement of a very mortal-sounding end. It's a flat-out contradiction. I mean, he has to be one or the other, doesn't he? Well, as you'll see, the answer is way more brilliant than that. To really crack this mystery, we have to understand the problem the Buddha was trying to solve. And it's a surprisingly human one, something we all deal with. The danger of taking things for granted. This is the question that shifts our whole perspective. If this death was a deliberate choice, then it must have had a purpose. The problem, it turns out, wasn't with the Buddha. It was with how people were reacting to his constant presence. So here's the core issue. Imagine if the ultimate teacher was just always around. After a while, you get complacent, right? You'd think, I'll get serious about my practice tomorrow. He's not going anywhere. People weren't doing the hard work. They weren't planting what's called roots of good. Instead, they were getting distracted by everyday desires and getting tangled up in their own limited ideas. You know, familiarity was breeding stagnation. So once you see the problem, you can really appreciate the genius of the solution, what we could call a skillful disappearance. And this right here, this word is the key that unlocks the entire teaching. This wasn't a lie. It wasn't some kind of trick. It was an expedient. And that changes everything. So what in the world is an expedient? Well, think of it as a skillful tool, a method used out of deep compassion to help someone grasp a truth they might not be ready for otherwise. It's a teaching tool that's perfectly designed for the student in that exact moment. This whole process, it's kind of like a parent teaching a kid how to ride a bike. At first, you're holding on, right? The kid feels safe, but they're totally dependent. If you never let go, they'd never learn to find their own balance. The parent's disappearance, that moment you let go of the seat, creates a jolt of urgency. And it's in that very moment the kid frantically figures out how to pedal and steer on their own. The Buddha's passing, that was the moment of letting go. So now that we understand why the Buddha announced his death, we can dive into the incredible truth of his eternity. This entire teaching is the absolute centerpiece of the Lotus Sutra, specifically chapter 16. This is where the Buddha basically pulls back the curtain and reveals his true nature. And it's not just some historical figure who lived and died. It's something way, way bigger. So get this. The Buddha isn't just the guy who lived 2,500 years ago. He explains that he actually attained enlightenment in the unimaginably distant past. His life in India, that was just one appearance, one skillful teaching. The reality is he has always been here, and he will always be here, guiding us. His physical death was just closing one chapter of an infinite book. And this is where it all comes home. What does all this cosmic, eternal teaching mean for you and me, right here, right now? This is the most important part. When you boil it all down, the whole point of this disappearing act was to get us to stop looking outside of ourselves for a savior. It was designed to make us realize that the path isn't about depending on some external person, but about waking up to the teaching that's already inside our own lives. Which of course leads us to the ultimate question. If he didn't really die and he's not physically walking around, well, where is the eternal Buddha now? And there's the answer. So simple, but so profound. The eternal Buddha, that potential for limitless wisdom and compassion, isn't somewhere out there in the sky or lost to history. It is the very potential that exists inside your own life. That's the goal of the whole thing. The death of the Buddha forces us to find the teacher within. And once you discover that amazing potential in yourself, you start to see it everywhere and in everyone. So that's where we'll leave it. The Buddha's final lesson wasn't about his death. It was about our life. It was a compassionate, skillful master plan to awaken us to our own boundless potential. So the only real question left is, what great potential is waiting to be awakened in you?